So welcome to the Right Honourable Lord Parekh. Viku Parekh, GBS, we're very pleased to have you. And we've got a few questions to ask you. And I'm sure our students are going to find this very interesting, informative, and add some nuance to their experience. So the first question I'd like to ask you is, at GBS, we pride ourselves in diversity in both students and staff. So could you please tell us about your journey from education in India, the University of Bombay, to studying and subsequently teaching at the London School of Economics? What a stratospheric ride.
Well, it's quite a remarkable difference between two countries, two institutions, and two experiences.
Yes.
I spent 6 years in the University of Bombay, 4 years doing my bachelor's degree, and 2 more years doing my master's. And during those 4 years, I am trying to be charitable. During those 4 years, I don't think I learned very much about anything. First of all, it was rote learning. Second, it was colonial curriculum, history, political science, economics, all heavily shaped by the colonial assumptions. It was also largely repetitive and not sufficiently analytical. When I came to the LSE, it was simply an eye-opener to be exposed to a world of scholarship which was utterly unfamiliar to me.
That's very interesting. And so does to try and elaborate on that, do you think the LSE still has that kind of depth and spectrum of scholarship?
Yes, I think it does. It does. Every institution has its period of glory and a period of decline. But great institutions, even when they fall, they never fall below a certain point.
Yes.
And I think the LSE or Oxford or Cambridge or these are other great universities.
Yes.
Show some signs of decline, but never such as to cause us anxiety. Whereas the inferior institutions, when they fall, it's a free fall. You never know where they will go and where they will end.
Yeah. I found that quite fascinating about the rote learning and in a degree. That's deeply unfashionable now, isn't it?
Yes, and even now, rote learning goes on. The teacher would dictate notes and you would take them down and memorize them, anticipate questions that might be asked, and make notes based on the guidebooks that are published so freely. So it all becomes a question of digests. Knowledge is digested into neat propositions, and you try to memorize them.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
I never learned analytical skills or critical skills in India. I only acquired them when I came to the LSE.
And I think that hopefully permeates all levels of education. At least here it does now, doesn't it? The kind of sense of the onus on analytical thinking. Certainly did with my daughters when they were growing up. I found different from my experience at school. Yeah.
Well, I think certainly analytical and critical skills are greatly valued here in Britain. Some might say at the expense of other skills, like sympathetic imagination, empathy, and so on. At the cost of all these analytical and critical skills are overvalued, but nevertheless, they are valued and they are important skills. And not to have them is to be deprived of something very valuable. That's what education can give you.
Yes.
So in India, my experience was precisely that the analytical skills were never really developed.
All right. Yes.
So there was no way I could question my teacher because I wasn't given the skill to teach. I had to question him.
Remarkable, isn't it?
Whatever he said, one took down with respect and reverence and reproduced with equal obedience.
Yeah. And we would hope nowadays that the students would be able to question us as academics, wouldn't we?
Yes. Well, it's a matter of degrees in some universities. This is discouraged, or some teachers discourage this. But by and large, teachers know that this
mm,
is something that the students are bound to do, to ask questions, criticize what teachers have taught, and they
mm.
should be able to respond.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, that minimal acceptance in my days was absent in India.
Mm,
And I would say that in some universities, it's absent even now in
mm,
many of the universities in India.
mm, mm. Well, can I move on to the next question? Is since then, of course, you've continued to teach political theory, political philosophy at some most prestigious universities in the UK, and you've written a number of publications, and also worked with various bodies advocating for racial equality in the UK. And what led you to these focal points in your career?
But when I came to the LSE, I had to decide what it is that I wanted to specialize in.
Mm.
And I thought the subject that interested me greatly was the idea of equality,
Mm.
because equality is something I had not seen in India. It was part of our constitution, given by the constitution, but in practice, the caste system, lots of other areas, economic inequalities, I saw them rampant. And I wanted to understand how I could make out a strong case for equality, what kind of equality, under what circumstances, equality of what, and when you are constantly told that people are unequal in their abilities,
Mm.
how do you convince them that while they may be unequal, nevertheless they are equal in their needs and require equal opportunity? So I was interested in that, came to the LSE, did my PhD on the idea of equality in English political thought.
Mm.
And that's how I spent my 4.5 years working in writing.
Yeah.
And also in the meantime, filling the gaps left behind my overall education in India.
And you, what is your estimation of equality, the state of equality in Britain at the moment?
The quality of?
The state of equality in Britain at the moment, what's your estimation of it?
Well, today the situation is very depressing.
Mm.
I mean, if one looks at the British picture as a whole, I would say that compared to India, in my days, there is that minimum equality which is accepted by all.
Mm.
You will not treat your servant dismissively, or you will not treat your your employees or whatever with certain superciliousness or with contempt. Minimal respect is due to your fellow human being. Now, that level of equality obtains in Britain, which in my days did not obtain, and I would say even now does not obtain in India. But a minister would treat his civil servant as his servant. He's a servant. And I can give you countless cases where the minister will be sitting there, the civil servant comes, he's not allowed to sit, he stands in front, answer questions, and is dismissed summarily. Now that kind of arrogant feudal attitude is absent in Britain. So there is a basic level of equality upon which we have built a complex structure of inequalities. Inequality based on class. But more important in the case of Britain, inequality based on rank, which is reflected in the House of Lords and in other areas of life too. Economic inequality, inequalities of opportunities, as a result of which you have inequalities in health, education, employment, and so on. So you have this superstructure of inequality, but at the base is this minimal equality, which makes this inequality acceptable.
That's
because you know that at the end of the day, the system recognizes you as a human being, will satisfy your basic needs in the form of welfare state and other ways. That the policeman will not treat you as a non-entity. He will talk to you with some degree of respect. Now that minimal respect to a fellow human being is guaranteed in Britain, which makes this inequality, no, I don't say it legitimizes it, but it makes you feel, look, we have got equality in this basic area. One day we'll get equality in other areas too.
Mm, mm, mm. That's interesting because it's a process that never ends, isn't it? I mean,
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I mean, equality is constantly changing benchmark. I mean, how do I know that somebody is equal to me? Let's say politically, equal power. All right, what does that mean? He has one vote, I have one vote.
yeah, yeah.
So in that sense, we both have equal electoral power. But
Mm,
that man is a better writer, is better connected. He can write wonderful letters to newspapers. He has access to his MPs, which I, because of my circumstances, don't have. He has more power than I.
yeah.
So that inequality has to be fought. How do we fight that inequality? So we have all got votes, but now we go and say everyone should have enough skill to contact his MP, access to MP, and so on.
Yeah, yeah, it's good. It is good. Exactly. The third question is really leads on from this. Can you tell us about your appointment as a Labour peer? Because what does it mean to you to sit in the House of Lords? Because we've just been talking about equality and status and rank.
Well, this is the whole thing. It was an extraordinary experience for me to be in the House of Lords. Here is somebody who had always been critical of ranking as a form of inequality, and to be told that I'm now going to be superior to my fellow human beings insofar as I would be addressed as Lord and they would not. Well, very embarrassing. It almost gives you a sense of guilt, bad feeling, a degree of inauthenticity. And I kept asking myself, if you are really serious about this socialism that you claim to subscribe to, can you be a Lord? Well, I said, well, look, I mean, being a Lord gives me the opportunity to say things I wouldn't otherwise be able to say, or to get certain things, to say certain things and get them heard, which may not be the case if I were not speaking as a peer. So for all these reasons, I somehow justified my newly acquired status to myself. At the same time, resolving to use this title only when absolutely necessary. And I have never used this title beyond the four walls of the House of Lords or outside. I think it's a status within the legal system, no place in the social system elsewhere. Why should it be extended into other areas? But when I first went to the House of Lords, you asked me what my feeling was, and I expressed it in my first speech, where I said, as I look around the House of Lords, where I sat, I see ghosts of lords who ruled over my country, some with great wisdom, others abominably. And I thought of Lord Curzon, who had discovered India's past, talked about the glorious India and so on, thought of Mountbatten, who made a complete mess of the whole thing, and responsible for the partition of India. All those memories still came flooding in. And it was overwhelming to be able to stand there and talk about this. But I spoke for about 12 minutes or 13 minutes with some degree of composure, although occasional lapses. And that, I think, expressed my feeling of pride that this country had valued me, that Britain has the magnanimity to welcome its own critics, to welcome people from its own colonies. And I have been in England since 1959. I became peer in 1999. For 40 years, I have been campaigning for racial equality. And here I was, at the end of the day, being recognized by Britain. So I think a sense of respect and love for Britain, as I always had, because it is here in this great country that I learned intellectual skills, that I learned the basic idea of equality, to treat human beings as equal. I've also learned civility, how to speak to people, how to talk to them with a degree of respect. And now I was a member of the House of Lords, fully integrated. Extraordinary experience, which I greatly valued and for which I care for this society and value.
That's so eloquent. You know, have you ever taken? Have you ever got? Have you ever not used it, but spoken about your peerage in India when you visited India? And then what would be the reception of that when you, if you did?
Well, I think it's very interesting. The day I got it, I was on my way to India. Not the day I got it, the day it was announced. Because I got it, I was with a little gap of 3 months between me being told privately that the Prime Minister was recommended to recommend me to the Queen, and the announcement was in April, and it's just so happened that I was on my way to India. Well, people valued it. They were glad that I was one of them, but I can't remember many searching questions being asked on what were my duties, what were my responsibilities, why was I chosen and not somebody else, what did I expect to do with the title. That was never asked, not only on the day it was announced, but during the several visits that I have made during the last 20 years, there was not that kind of curiosity. They simply assumed that it was a member of the upper house, similar to the upper house in India, which of course is not true at all, because upper house is quite different from the lower house, from the upper house in India.
Well, my fourth question is, what advice really would you give to our students at GBS who haven't really fully decided on the direction of their career, but they have multiple interests maybe in life and haven't quite decided what to do with the direction of their career?
Well, I would give, I mean, I'm not in the business of giving advice to people. I would rather follow my own advice. But nevertheless, I would say three things to your students. First of all, do something which gives you a sense of fulfillment. Don't just like many Indian students who want to be doctors because they are doctors' children, or somebody want to be nurses because their mothers were nurses. Don't follow somebody. Don't try to conform to somebody's expectations. Just look at various interests that you have. Which one thrills you, fulfills you? Devote yourself to it, because that's what gives your life a sense of meaning. That's the first thing. Do what gives you a sense of satisfaction. Secondly, don't be obsessed with that which interests you. Also keep your mind open to other interests. Because as you get old, and or as there is a pandemic, you ask yourself, what do I do? I only know how to read and write, how to write books. But that I cannot do because the pandemic doesn't allow me that kind of mental luxury. Have I interest in art? No. In literature? No. In cinema? No. In theater? No. What do I do? So it's very important in life to have a multiple interest so that your life is never empty. The fullness of human life must be enjoyed. Not only the focus of human life, the depth of human life, which is one particular interest for which you enter the world, but also multiple interests which support each other and give you a sense of fulfillment. And underlying all that is a third piece of advice, which is you are, by virtue of being in the university or elsewhere, or GBS or anything else, you are, by virtue of all that, getting the additional opportunity to acquire certain skills. Don't forget your fellow human beings. They also, many of them are denied those opportunities. And the question you should be asking yourself constantly is, what have I done for them? What can I do for them? The sense of sympathy for the less fortunate, sadly missing in this country and many others, almost every country I can think of. That to me is the backbone of your life. Cultivate your intellectual and other interests, but also develop your sense of sympathy and compassion for your fellow human beings.
Three great points, I think, to end on. That they will be, we will carry this to the students, I think, and it will be extremely valuable to them. Thank you very much for
It's a pleasure.
it's a pleasure for us.